The Arauco War was a long-running conflict between colonial Spaniards and the Mapuche people, mostly fought in the Araucanía. After many initial Spanish successes in penetrating Mapuche territory, the Battle of Curalaba in 1598 and the following destruction of the seven cities marked a turning point in the war, leading to the establishment of a clear frontier between the Spanish domains and the land of the independent Mapuche. From the 17th to the late 18th century, a series of parliaments were held between royal governors and Mapuche loncos, and the war devolved to sporadic pillaging carried out by Spanish soldiers as well as Mapuches and outlaws. The Chilean War of Independence brought new hostilities to the frontier, with different factions of Spaniards, Chileans and Mapuches fighting for independence, royalism or personal gain. Mapuche independence finally ended with the Chilean occupation of Araucanía between 1861 and 1883. The modern Mapuche conflict is partially inspired in the Arauco War. Spanish conquest. The beginning of the conflict is usually placed at the Battle of Renegaren, which occurred in 1536 between an expedition of Diego de Almagro and a well-organized and numerous group of Mapuche soldiers, near the confluence of the Nubal and Atata rivers. Campaigns of Pedro de Valdivia. During the early phase of the conquest of Chile, the Spanish conquistador Pedro de Valdivia conducted a 9-year campaign to secure the city of Santiago, which had been destroyed on September 11, 1541 by the Mapocos, under the direction of their chief, Michimalonco. Valdivia hoped to enlarge the territory under his jurisdiction and, despite injuries from a fall from his horse, resolved to take personal command of a land expedition into Araucanía. In 1544, sent a naval expedition comprising the bucks, San Pedro and Santiaguillo, under the command of Juan Bautista Paisner, to reconnoiter the southwestern coast of South America to the Strait of Magellan. The expedition set sail from Valparaiso, entered the Bay of San Pedro, and made landings at what is now known as Concepcion and at Valdivia, which was later named in honor of the commander. Encountering severe storms further south, he then returned to Valparaiso. Valdivia himself set out in 1546, with 60 horsemen plus guides and porters, and crossed the Atata River and were attacked by Mapuche warriors in the Battle of Quilicura near the Bio River. Realizing that it would be impossible to proceed in such hostile territory with so limited a force, Valdivia elected to return to Santiago after finding a site for a new city at what is now Penco, and that would become the first site of Concepcion. Founding of Concepcion, Imperial, and Valdivia in 1550, a new expedition was launched, consisting of a naval force under Paisner, and a land force of 200 Spaniards mounted and foot, and a number of Mapoco auxiliaries under Valdivia. They planned to reunite on the shores of the Bay of Concepcion. The expedition advanced beyond the Atata River and Laja River, to the shores of the Bio River. Along the way they had several battles with groups of Mapuches as they explored the region, killing many with little loss to themselves. After spending over a week in the area and encountering increasing opposition, the Spanish marched toward the sea through the valleys of the Laja and Bio rivers, towards the coast at Penco. On the banks of the Andalian River, they camped for 2 days between the river and the lake, where they were attacked on the second night by a large force of Araucanians under their Toquiinavillo in the Battle of Andalian. The night attack was defeated in a furious battle. The Spaniards suffered 1 killed and many wounds to men and especially their mounts. After a day treating their wounds, they continued towards their rendezvous at the Bay of Concepcion. There Valdivia began building a fort at what is now Penco. On February 23, Pasten's fleet anchored in the bay, brought supplies, reinforcements and provided materials to finish the fort. On March 1, Valdivia founded here the city of Concepcion del Nuevo Extremo. On March 3 of that year, the fort was completed and was attacked 9 days later by the largest force of Mapuches yet seen in the Battle of Penco. This force was broken and routed despite the small size of the Spanish forces. Despite the resulting submission of the local tribes, Valdivia sent an emissary to the Viceroy of Peru, asking for additional forces. He knew that it would not be possible to complete the conquest of Araucania with only the forces at his disposal. After reinforcement at Concepcion in 1551, he organized another expedition to establish the Fort La Imperial on the banks of the Imperial River. He then returned to Concepcion to prepare another expedition and await the reinforcements the Viceroy had promised to send by sea, leaving orders that the new troops should disembark on the Tierras de Valdivia that Pasma had discovered earlier. Valdivia left with 200 soldiers in the direction of Fort Imperial. Once he had passed it on his way south, he ordered Gerónimo de Heraldry to drive inland and establish a fort, with the goal of securing his eastern flank. To this end, Alderaan reached Lake Villarica and established a fort there. Meanwhile, Valdivia's column advanced southwards and joined the reinforcements sent from Peru, under the command of Francisco de Villagra. There, the city of Santa Maria la Blanca de Valdivia was established. After garrisoning these new places, Valdivia returned to his base at Concepcion in 1552, where rich placer gold mines were found in the Quillicoy River Valley. First Great Mapuche Rebellion, Lautaro and the Battle of Tucapel, with the goal of securing the lines of communication with the southern forts. Valdivia launched a third expedition which established forts at Tucapel, Purén, Confines and Arauco. The Araucanians didn't offer any resistance to the conquistadors in their fort building. In October 1553, the Quillicoy gold mine was opened and large numbers of Mapuche were forced to work in it. In 1553, the Mapuches held a council at which, because of the growth of Spanish forces in their territory, they resolved to make war. They chose as their toqui an extraordinarily strong man called Corpolican and as his vice-toqui Lautaro, because he had served as an auxiliary to the Spanish cavalry. His experiences with the Spanish gave him insight into the best methods for fighting the conquistadors. With 6,000 warriors under his command, Lautaro attacked the fort at Tucapel. The Spanish garrison was unable to withstand the assault and retreated to Purén, and Lautaro seized and burned the fort and prepared his army, certain that the Spaniards would attempt to retake Tucapel. Valdivia, with a reduced force, mounted a counter-attack, but he was quickly surrounded and his army was massacred by the Mapuches in the Battle of Tucapel. This was Pedro de Valdivia's last battle. He was captured and later killed in captivity when he refused to concede defeat. Campaigns of Corpolican and Lautaro. After the defeat at Tucapel, the Spanish hurriedly reorganized their forces, reinforcing Fort Imperial for its defense and abandoning Confines and Arauco in order to strengthen Concepcion. However, Araucanian tradition dictated a lengthy victory celebration, which kept Lautaro from exploiting the weakness of the Spanish position as he desired. It was only in February 1554 that he succeeded in putting together an army of 8,000 men, just in time to confront a punitive expedition under the command of Francisco de Villagra at the Battle of Marahuenu. Despite this new victory, Lautaro was again unable to pursue the opportunity due to the celebrations and beliefs of his people. By the time he arrived at Concepcion, it was already abandoned. After burning it, he could not continue the offensive with his remaining forces, and the campaign came to an end as the warriors demobilized. In Santiago, Villagra reorganized his forces, and that same year of 1554, he departed again for Arauco and reinforced the strongholds of Imperial and Valdivia, which allowed the garrisons and their Indian friends to make many raids on the surrounding Mapuche settlements, burning houses and fields and killing all they found. Resulting devastation produced a famine and an epidemic among the hostile Mapuche around those cities. Meanwhile, in the north during 1554, news of the victories of Lautaro were only to uprisings by the previously subdued Promocies in the valley of the Mataquito River and the Picunch in the valley of the Aconcagua River, but these were put down. In 1555, the Real Audiencia in Lima ordered Villagra to reconstruct Concepcion, which was accomplished by Capitan Alvarado and 75 colonists. When he learned that it was being rebuilt, Lautaro again attacked Concepcion with 4,000 warriors. Alvarado attempted to defeat Lautaro's army outside the city, then fled to the city pursued by Lautaro's army. Only 38 Spaniards managed to escape by sea from this second destruction of the city. Following this victory in 1556, the Promoces sent a message to the Mapuche of Arauco promising food to support their army and warriors to join it in a war against the Spanish in Santiago. Lautaro's campaigns against Santiago after his victories in the south and the messages promising support from the north. Lautaro planned an assault on Santiago. With the ravages of the recent epidemic and the needs of the campaign against the Spanish still occupying cities within Mapuche territory still going on, he was not able to draw many troops from the main Mapuche army for his campaign to the north. He had to rely on recruiting warriors among the people north of the Biobío River, among subjugated Mapuche and the Promocies north of the Atata River, who were now inspired by the previous successes of Lautaro to revolt again. But when he entered the places subject to Santiago, he began taking reprisals against the Promocies who refused to join him, doing great damage in depopulating the land. The refugees fled to the city for aid and protection. In October 1556 he reached the Mataquito River in his northward march. There he built a fortified camp near Tena in a place called Petio as a base of operations against Santiago. Lautaro ambushed a first probe by a small Spanish force from Santiago. A larger force under Pedro de Villagra later attacked the fortress at Petio over several days but were not able to take it and were forced away by flooding. However, with unfavorable losses and more Spaniards coming to Villagra's support, Lautaro retreated towards the Maule River hoping to establish himself there. However, the Spanish cavalry of Juan Godinez pursued to the Maule River, cutting down stragglers, and one of Lautaro's detachments was cut to pieces. Lautaro's army gave them the slip, but was forced to fall back beyond the Atata River. Captain Godinez returned victorious from this pursuit and put great fear into the Promocies by punishing them with destruction of their herds, fields and houses, and by cutting off some heads, as a lesson not to call upon the Mapuche army or give aid to them. In January 1557, Francisco de Villagra advanced southward to aid the remaining cities against the Mapuche army led by Corpolican. Informed by his allies the city of Santiago was now relatively unprotected, Lautaro evaded Villagra, letting him pass to the south while he marched again towards Santiago with a new army including allies under Panigualgo. However, Lautaro's mistreatment of the intimidated local Indians to extract provisions had created dissension among his allies. His allies separated from him after the army reached the Mataquito River at Laura, after a dispute over his actions with an allied leader named Chilin who accused Lautaro of acting like the Spaniards. He moved his remaining army over a league upriver and again established a fortified camp on the Mataquito River amid a carousel at the foot of a wooded hill. However, its location was betrayed to Francisco de Villagra by local Indians previously abused by Lautaro. Villagra sent word to Juan Godinez near Santiago to meet him as he hurried north. The Spanish forces met without Lautaro being alerted and made a surprise night march over the hills of Corna, to the hill overlooking Lautaro's camp, on the shore of the Mataquito River. On April 29, at dawn, Villagra began the Battle of Mataquito with a surprise attack on the camp in which they killed Lautaro and obtained a decisive victory, destroying his army and dispersing his allies. campaigns of Corpolicán and García Hurtado de Mendoza. After the death of Gerónimo de Alderete in Panama while returning to Chile, García Hurtado de Mendoza was designated the interim governor of Chile in 1557, and immediately sailed south from Peru, this time with a much stronger force than before. 600 soldiers, 6 pieces of artillery, and 1,000 horses. He landed in La Serena and had the rival contenders for the governorship, Francisco de Villagra and Francisco de Aguirre, arrested and sent to Peru, and put his own men in control of the province. Sending his cavalry by land, he sailed south in winter and landed in early June 1557 on the island of La Quiriquina at the mouth of the Bay of Concepcion. He ordered a party to land at Penco and reconstruct the fort of Concepcion. A Mapuche army attempted to raise the fort but were defeated by artillery and gunfire. After his cavalry and horses arrived overland from Santiago, Mendoza began his advance to the south of the Biobío, and another Mapuche army including Galvarino attempted to stop them in the open field in the Battle of Lugunias, but again were defeated after hard fighting, and as a result their fortress at Andalican, the gateway to Arauco, was left undefended and was captured soon after the battle. Corpolicán led the Mapuche, unsuccessfully resisting the advance of Hurtado de Mendoza by attacking him from ambush in the Battle of Milarepa. After further fighting near the site of the ruined fortress of Tucapel, Mendoza built the fort and city of Caneta de la Frontera and continued to the south. There he established the city of Osorno and explored southward to the Gulf of Ancud. Attempting to throw off the Spanish occupation, Corpolicán attacked the fort of Caneta, expecting the gates to be opened by the treachery of Ayanacuna within, but he was betrayed instead and was badly defeated by Captain Alonso de Reynoso. Although he was able to escape immediately after this last battle when Spanish cavalry did not arrive in time to pursue, he was eventually betrayed and captured in the mountains by Pedro de Avendano, sentenced to death by Alonso de Reynoso and executed by impalement in Caneta. After the death of Corpolicán, García Hurtado de Mendoza thought that they had subjugated the Mapuche. On the contrary, the manner of the death of Corpolicán inspired the Mapuches to continue the struggle with a guerrilla war in which there was no day that some Yanacones or once in a while some encomendero did not die at hands of Mapuches. When the number of missing or dead reached 400 Yanacones and 10 Spaniards, the governor was convinced that he had been mistaken. In Quiapo, the Mapuches under their new Toqui Corpolicán the Younger constructed a fort that was to stop the forces of Mendoza from marching into Arauco and rebuilding a fort there. Mendoza advanced from Caneta and crushed another Mapuche army at the Battle of Quiapo. After the battle, Hurtado de Mendoza had most of the captured Mapuche executed, but saved Pete Gueren, son of Cuyomanc, an important cacique in the Arauco region. Through his help and that of the Grateful Father, he was able contact and to bring most of the leaders of Arauco and Tucapel to submit to Spanish rule following the reconstruction of the fort in Arauco. Mendoza also founded the city of San Andrés de Arangel or Los Infantos not far from the old fort of Confines. In February 1561, Philip II relieved García Hurtado de Mendoza, replacing him as governor with the victor over Lautaro, Francisco de Villagra. Mendoza left Chile with the belief that he had overcome the Mapuche. He was one of the few governors who obtained a certain degree of success in the war. This success was due to the large numbers of experienced soldiers, equipment and arms that he brought which were not available to the previous conquerors, and because the Mapuche did not have a strategist to equal Lautaro. The Mapuches pretended peace, but secretly continued to prepare for a new revolt. Soon after the defeat at Coyapel, the surviving leaders gathered and elected Ilangalien as the new Toqui. With most of the nation's warriors dead or wounded and the population decimated by the effects of war, starvation and disease, he decided to retreat into the marshes of Lumaco and there gather their strength and train a new generation of warriors for a future revolt. The Mapuche had learned to work iron, use Spanish weapons, ride horses captured from their conquerors, and learned better strategies and tactics. The defeats inflicted by Mendoza had made the Mapuche a united people, and one committed to renewing the war against the Spanish to secure independence.